Okay, good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Mike Harvey, the Superintendent of the Masconomet Regional School District. Tonight we have with us one of our finalists for the position of Assistant Superintendent for Student Services, Lynne Bennett. Welcome, Lynne. Lynne spent the day at Masco, or most of the day, meeting with different constituents from our district team. Meeting with administration, teachers, some of the office personnel. So she had a full day at school today to try and get a sense of what Masco is all about. So I'm gonna, in a couple of minutes, turn things over to Lynne and just let her introduce herself to everybody. And then I will also post in the chat a link to a feedback form so that you can leave your thoughts and impressions on the candidate. It actually works for both of the candidates. It's just a drop down and you pick the name. And I'm trying to think of what else I needed to say. We're recording this so that other people who were not able to join us will be able to see it. And actually, in order to, the format for tonight is really just sort of a question and answer from members of the audience for the candidate. We don't have a script. I don't have a script, obviously. So what I'd ask you to do is use the reaction button down on your taskbar on the bottom to raise your hand. And then we can unmute you and let you ask your questions and you can hear from Lynne. So Lynne, welcome, and give you a couple of minutes to introduce yourself to the people here tonight.
Make sure I'm not muted. How many times have we heard that? Yeah, thank you. Hi, everybody. Thanks for taking the time out of your day, your nighttime, actually, your family life, to spend a few minutes with me to learn about what I've done, where I'm going, why I chose Masco. Right now, special ed administrator, at the secondary level for Arlington Public Schools. In that role, I'm responsible for partnerships with school counselors, with related service providers. I oversee related service providers, special education staff. I'm responsible for evaluation and supervising of staff. A big role that I play is getting involved and helping mediate any kind of disagreements or just not seeing outcomes in special education the same way. I might get invited to the table. I work quite a bit with district level staff and then also principals, assistant principals. Before that, I was actually a team chair in Haverhill Public Schools. So you'll notice if you look at my resume, it's followed a little bit of the pattern of my children. I've started out, I was actually the Director of Student Services for Danvers Public Schools, and then was blessed with becoming a parent. And when I became a parent, you realize how much work that is. And I ended up making, which I think is the right decision, time with my family, and then eased back into the field of kind of following a pattern of what the schedules were for school. But now my children are high school aged and they are wanting less of me. So it's allowing me to now get into what I really want to do, which is to make a really a broader impact, more, especially as a result of the pandemic, on the bigger level for students who are high needs or in need of services.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
So as I said, please use the reaction button there to raise your hand and ask a question.
Or I'm okay too, if people just want to like literally raise your hand.
That's it. There's Gretchen.
Hi, Gretchen.
Hi, I was hoping not to go first because I have background noise, but I didn't see any hands, so I'll jump right in. It's nice to meet you. Thank you so much for spending some time with us tonight. I live in Boxford. I'm on the board of the CPAC. And so I have a kind of a two-part question for you. I'm curious to know your past experience with CPACs and the districts that you've worked with. And what do you see your partnership with CPAC at Masconomet looking like? And do you consider the voice of parents and students in the planning of district needs as part of the process?
Mm. Yeah, I like that question, and I often like it more when I hear, do I involve students? I was pleasantly surprised that when I got into the first round of interviews, there was actually student representation. So I was really pleased with that. It says a lot about the district. My CPAC relationships, I've been involved with CPACs in districts where it's been a hostile relationship. And I think it's really, arrested, has stopped any kind of progress for students. I find that many times the younger the student, the more the parents are involved. So I've worked hard at the secondary level to try to keep parents involved. For some reason, there seems to be a little bit of phasing off. We do attend, right now, we're actually doing our CPAC meetings virtually, which seems to have increased the participation. We have a person who has been at the head of the CPAC who's very active in our community and takes a very active role in bringing the voice of the parents to us, and partners right along with programming, will bring suggestions to the table. Recently, she had brought to my attention that she felt like some of the literature we were using in the English Language Arts department probably wasn't vetted for diversity and equity. So we have that open door back and forth with the expectation that should always be respectful. We can have disagreements, but the ultimate goal is to focus on the students and how do we get all students' needs met within our resources and our skill set.
That's great. Thank you so much.
We just bounced over, Gretchen.
Oh.
Yeah, she moved.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. We have, just so you know, enjoyed a very good relationship for a long time with administration. And our district is a little unique in that obviously Masconomet is 7 through 12, but CPAC covers K through 12. So we often have the advantage of bringing to your attention things that we see in the elementary school that are coming up. And this is something that Patty Bullard did really, really well, is that she listened a lot to what we were saying or what we were hearing from parents with kids that are younger, because you'll get them one day. And so it's been nice, and we look forward to continuing a similar relationship and watching that grow. We would love to grow also the student involvement in programming and planning and procedure, because we're not doing that so well right now. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's great. Like, there are definitely times where we include student voice, but in terms of the CPAC, that's an area that we need to grow. So I appreciate your time.
Happy to be a part of that. I've noticed in most recent, like with the pandemic, kind of getting everybody together at the same time and hearing the same voices has been hard. But I also appreciate, I tend to take a view of 3 years ahead and 3 years back to anticipate what's coming. That's budgetary reasons, but also in terms of programming, to make sure that our children have what they require in terms of programming. So happy to join that.
Great. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thanks, Gretchen. Next up, Jackie.
Hi, Lynn. Nice to see you again.
Hi, Jackie.
I had the pleasure of sitting on the initial interview committee. Sorry, I have somebody coming in my space.
No worries.
So I'm also, again, a representative of the CPAC, as I was on the interview committee. But my question for you is about what would your vision be for the direction of special education and special education department within Masco?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. Part of what I did when I first started looking into Masco was I was very curious about what your mission is, what your school improvement plan is, to see if it aligned with how I believe in education, how I believe in, raising up students. It aligned quite well. There's something that you have called Vision 2025. And it talks about kind of the personalized learning, more the academic piece, and then it went into the social emotional piece, then it went into diversity and equity. And those are 3 pillars, which I strongly support. I would want to carry on That, but I would put a very, I would put a very big emphasis on social emotional and diversity and equity. I walk and talk those parts of students. When we think about bringing them to the academic table, if they don't feel like a member and their brain isn't calm, the maximized learning is not going to happen. And I need the content, I call teachers content specialists, so general ed teachers, to be able to do their magic. And in terms of student services, we want to be able to partner that by mitigating some of what's brought to the classroom. And often when we think of diversity, we think of what we can see, but there may be that learner that is not, who might be doing well academically, but is silently not talking about what their narrative is, but is still not maximizing their growth. So I would be mindful of that as well.
Thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Jackie. Next up, Zilly.
Hi there. Hi, Lynn. I'm Zilly
Oh,
over
There
here.
you go. Hi, Billy. Fun name.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It is. I used to work with kids and I would say it's like silly with a Z. That's how you remember it. Anyway, so thanks for being here. I'm happy to meet you. Something you just said reminded me of something that I have two in the high school now, but one graduated last year. And during the pandemic, during remote learning, we were talking a little bit about how does she feel about engaging with the teachers? And something she said really resonated, which was, Mom, the teachers that made you feel safe in school are the same teachers that make you feel safe on remote. You know, when you walk into a room, if this is a place that you can be safe to learn, and the teachers are bringing that into the online room. I thought that was beautiful, and it kind of resonated with what you just said about feeling like the feeling of belonging. So
And
my
it matters.
question-
I believe your child, it matters.
It does.
Yeah.
So, and I can quote her because she's not at the school anymore, so she won't get mad at me for talking about her. The question related to that is, when we heard from some department heads a couple weeks ago I'm on the school committee, full disclosure, by the way.
Okay.
Department heads a couple weeks ago, a comment was made about how some feedback from some teachers was that we talk about SEL, and we also, as Gretchen, I'm sure I hopped on late, but I'm sure we've talked about executive functioning and other trauma-informed practices and things like that. We don't always see it happening. Like we're not sure if we're seeing it happening. And a great conversation came through that a lot of things are happening and teachers might not be identifying it as that. But the question is, how do we get the trickle down so that the common language around those things is consistent for more, ideally all, of the staff and teachers, and as well for parents to have access to the language around those things for all students, because it will eventually, what helps, Gretchen, I'm preaching your language here. What helps the student with the highest needs is going to help all students. How do we get that beyond the experts, the amazing staff we have in the student services department, accessible to everyone?
It's a tall question. But in the eyes, in the wake of pandemic, I think it's probably very important, because the term social emotional learning is almost a catch-all term. It's almost lost its acuity and its poignancy. So I would say to you that one of the first things that has to be done is an understanding of what we mean by social emotional SEL. We have to have a clear understanding of what that is, how you obtain that. And I'm not sure what Masco has done is collecting data on that. In Arlington, we actually issue out panoramic surveys, and it goes out to parents, it goes out to students, it goes out to staff. And we take the data and we talk about it and we look at where is it that people are emphasizing a need. So then we target what we're doing to hone in to help mitigate some of that huge for us. For us in Arlington, it's a huge level of anxiety and fear. Anxiety and fear is permeating. So you then take that data and you operationalize it into your interventions. Our interventions range from making sure our staff know that we have EAP programming, making sure that we excuse their time with an understanding that it's family, or that it's stress related or anxiety related, and that sick days are not just physical sick days. Sometimes they're unplugged mental health days. And then we also took it into the students level where we would expand some group psychoeducational groups we were doing, making sure we're connecting with the community resources, which we all know is overburdened right now. It's not very easy to access mental health services. And then we keep looping back to it to measure how we're doing with it. I can say to you that I think it's made a very nice difference, but it has not resolved. It has not resolved the acuity of the anxiety that's going on. So in addition to that, I think what helps is to, and I was talking about this earlier, is to get us into the hallways of the schools and reach out and get familiar and build those relationships with staff, get to be familiar and just simply offer them a pat on the shoulder, you know what's going on. And then with students, I just know that if and when teachers are feeling capable to do their work, it's going to translate to the students. I am 100% sure your teachers are not sharing their distress with their students, but it's what's not being said that students are picking up anywhere, not just Masco. And so we just want to make sure that that's for us in Arlington, that's where we needed to hone into. You had to kind of quadrant it out to look at where it was that was being impacted. So it makes you a little bit more efficient. You're welcome. I saw that you were still muted, but I read your lips. I don't see a hand.
Yeah, other questions, please raise your hand. Candace?
All right, I think we're good. All right.
You're on.
I'm Candace Snyder and I have kids in Topsfield. I'm a pediatrician and I am also part of CPAC. So thank you for coming and chatting with those of us who were not part of your earlier conversations. So that was a nice opportunity. I wanted to ask what you think the most innovative or sort of change-making project, event, or thing you did within the Arlington school system. What would you say most kind of rocked the boat or changed directions from their previous, I don't know, history or projects?
Sure. Yeah, I'm very proud of the work that I've done with co-teaching. When I started in Arlington, there was not co-teaching. There were intermittent kind of team teaching. Sometimes like if the classes were large, content areas might do a team teach, but it wasn't, you'll hear me say this a lot, you know, targeting your interventions based on data, right? So it wasn't necessarily targeted. So after my first year, I did a lot of front end work my first year in terms of sharing the knowledge, sharing my vision, where I would like to go. But it was not until my second year that we actually took the dive and the directors of each department partnered with me in this. Some were hesitant. Parents were hesitant. I think change in general was hard on such a larger level. But we started out small and we did a couple of sections in each content area, like grade 9, couple in ELA, couple of in their geometry or algebra 1, science and history. And that first year was a mess. I don't know how else to say that. It was a mess. But what wasn't a mess was us reflecting, going back and finding out why it was a mess. We didn't give up and say it doesn't work. What did work is we took the first step. What we learned from that is that the classrooms, when we first set it up, they became like a class full of high need students. That there was like this, if a general ed neurotypical child was assigned to the co-talk class, they were asking to be removed. That's has a lot to do with belief systems and how children and students can learn together that we had to work with. But it was also true that they were full classrooms of high need teachers, and great instruction and learning is not going to happen in that environment. The needs are too broad and too deep. So we moved to a 50% high need students in the classroom and 50% of your more neurotypical, not identified high needs. And we also cap it no more than, I think it's about 18 now. So it's a special educator, certified special educator, and then a content specialist. And then we have these kind of parameters. I still don't think that's perfect, but it is a lot better. And there's a lot more work going on. So now it's moved to, our ultimate goal is a third of the class being high needs. So now we have co-taught sections of an average of about 3 sections. English is becoming a little bit more in your sciences, your maths, your histories, and your ELA. And next year, we're actually rolling out 2 world language. That's grades 9 to 11. Grade 12, we have to assess the need. We haven't had the need yet. What we tend to do is pull back more to a push in, because my philosophy is that I want students to take on more autonomy while they're still in the safety of the school, so we can monitor how they apply their skill set. So right now, co-teaching goes up to the 11th grade, and then we start phasing back some of the intentional, explicit involvement to see how each student is carrying on what they've learned for their skill sets. And all of our co-taught classes are college prep levels. They are not like level Bs or whatever language it is for highly modified classes. They are college prep levels.
Hold on, Candace, hold on. There you go.
Thank you. It's like, wasn't on me. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I was wondering, so I personally appreciate the fact that you've mentioned data several times, because that is something that I have been very interested in. I can see some of my fellow CPAC friends smiling. Something that we are looking at in the elementary schools as a CPAC is asking for more transparency around data, and asking for goals and for public aggregated data that the community can follow and sort of see our trajectory as we make a shift in teaching that is a big overhaul and will require new teaching methods, new programs, new curriculum, new resources. I was wondering if in your career you guys have had any publicly tracked data around the schools, and what your thoughts in general would be around identifying specific measures and how you would track them over time and publishing them. Sort of like maybe it's on the Masco page, like here's where we're at towards this metric. This is the next time we'll reassess it. You know, this is our trend. Does that make sense? Like, so that the community kind of has an idea of where you guys are at, and then you have a way of sort of, you know, what do you call it? Advertising your successes, if that makes sense. I know it's a lot, but.
Yeah, well, so yes, the advertising successes are tremendous. And I would wonder if districts feel a little hesitant to advertise their non-successes, right? Because we want to make sure that we have our conversations, you know, kindly and respectfully and not finger pointing. I don't know that that's happening in Masco, but that would be something that would come up to mind. In Arlington, they do actually share. Our assistant superintendent now for curriculum, Dr. Rod McNeil, he does that. Now, he may have a lot more data that I don't know that he's sharing, but when it comes to the targeted points that we address with SEL, when it comes to straightforward academic progress, either through MCAS or other standardized testing, he brings that to the staff, and he also brings it to the school committee. It's not published on a website, but it is made public through our school committee. I would have to believe, though, if there's a particular, I would like to know if there's a particular data source that you're curious about, I would be far more likely to say how than no, because I would imagine you're going to teach me something about that. But I would be far more likely to see and take a look and unpack that with you and say how versus a straightaway no.
I see what you mean. I appreciate that honest answer. And I would say there are, of course, like a number of areas that I know my colleagues who've been in CPAC longer than I have, and also have children who are older and who may have gone through Masco, have a little more familiarity with some of these issues they might want to track and kind of brainstorm around. Personally, through my children's disabilities and my experience at the elementary level, literacy has been something that I've been very interested in as part of CPAC. I know specifically I'd be wanting to track things like how many interventionists are there, how many kids per grade are receiving intervention support, how many are on IEPs for reading disabilities, when how many are coming up and how many are diagnosed while they're at Masco, that kind of stuff, to track where is the need and are we addressing the need. And because the elementary schools in the Tri-Town are starting to make this groundswell change from balanced literacy to structured literacy, hopefully those effects will be seen at Masco. So I kind of see now as like the ideal time to really start collecting that data so that we can see what the effects of that change is as these kids start to move through the system. So anyway, I'm just going to give you that specific and where I was coming from with that.
Right.
But again, I know that people in the community, I'm sure, would have their own ideas of particular metrics that they would be interested in seeing and identifying target goals for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. I can hear that.
Okay, other questions? Please raise your hand. Gretchen?
Okay, I could ask 1,000 questions and I promise I won't.
Come on, Gretchen, I knew you were good for a couple.
Yeah. I have a lot. I have a list. I'm going to piggyback off of the literacy issue that Candace was just talking about, because this is something we've been talking about at Masco. We are seeing reading needs increase over the years, and it's something that the CPAC has been talking to administration about a lot. And so one of the things that I'm hearing from parents is that from the general education teachers, sort of that understanding of reading failure, because I think it's unexpected when you get to middle and especially high school, right? I'm sure the majority of our gen ed teachers are not assuming that they're going to have kids come in with unidentified reading needs. And so I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about, I mean, obviously we need to, intervene and catch kids up, but how do you sort of like really bring the Masco community together, the staff community, in particular the general education staff, and help them understand sort of where our kids are coming from? The statistics for the 7th graders last year were really bad, and this is not a reflection of what Masconomet is teaching. This is a reflection of poor intervention early. But a significant number of kids are coming up to Masco with unidentified reading needs. And so I don't know if I'm making sense, but I'm just wondering if, like, what's your general sense? How do you sort of gather our staff to support these kids? Because it is taxing on the special education department. We sort of need like an understanding that we have a large area of weakness, and you're gonna see that in kids that are not already identified.
Thank you for that. You made a lot of sense. Could I answer with a couple of questions so I get a little bit more context?
Yeah.
What's your experience with the great divide? I use that as a historical statement between general ed and special ed educators. Is it collaborative? Is it my kids, your kids, our could you give me a sense of, from a parent lens?
Yeah, well, to be honest, my children on IEPs are out of district.
Okay.
So I have experience with one child right now at Masco who's on an IEP, and I'm going to speak more to feedback I get from other parents, and a little bit some of my own personal experience is that our student support staff is doing a fantastic job. I know many of them are on here right now, and we really feel that I think that administration has been working hard at building so many skills through professional development. They're just great. We feel like that sort of falls off the cliff in the general education classrooms.
Oh, okay.
And I don't think that, I know that is not universal. But I also know that there are staff unfamiliar, for example, with accommodations in our DCAP. So I think we have work to do. And I say that certainly not to call anybody out, but there's always room for growth, right? And so, when we hear parents that are disgruntled, it's often from that setting.
Mm. Okay, yeah, that was helpful. My experience currently is we have explicit reading instruction from elementary up through the high school. And so it is actually not a special ed service, it's a general ed service. And that made a huge difference in a shared responsibility.
Yeah.
There are IEPs that have reading services. I don't want to imply that that doesn't happen.
Yep.
But as a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, reading is like this, all the way, all the way through all those tiers. That, back in the day, when I was at my formative beginning in education, it was, if, all students should read by 3rd grade. It was just this kind of statement, right? And we know that children are not fixed in their thinking. We know that they're not, born with a certain capacity. So having that access and intervention as a standard opportunity for anybody in need is, it flies in the face of that fixed kind of mindset. And it's been I think in the beginning, when I first came into Arlington, people were surprised. Why do you need reading up in the high school? Because it's still that kind of belief system. Not now necessarily, and I'm not harping that Arlington has done anything wrong. It is about sharing the responsibility of the student in their entirety.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jackie, do you have any questions about inclusion? I think
There we
There
go.
you go.
Actually, that's a perfect opportunity. And we can probably circle through all of the CPAC members a number of times. If you'd
I'll
like.
stop. I promise.
But a perfect segue into that is, could you give us an idea of what very meaningful inclusion looks like for all students, but in particular kind of where my heart and my focus sits is with students who have more significant intellectual disabilities? And what does that look like within the community, within the school environment, all the way from middle school up to high school, and then even 18 to 22?
Mm-hmm. We are, Allison Elmer is the special ed director at Arlington, and she is a strong proponent of developing in-district program. She very much walks the talk about students having the same access to what other students have. That trickles onto all of us. We do have some sub-separate programs. I'm actually correcting myself. We have one program that has a sub-separate component, but our program that's speaking a little bit to more of the population that you're talking about, we actually have them working with what we first started doing was getting gen ed teachers that were feeling comfortable enough to take on into their class a learner who had significant modifications to content. It's very different than accommodation. Teachers are generally familiar with accommodation. And we do send them in initially with, we call them behavioral support, old school paraprofessionals, so that we can start bridging that gap of the student getting familiar with what's expected, the student getting support to know what to take away and accomplish, helping the student take a part in the essential features of the lesson. And then we also do some back training on universal design, so that when we start working on what's great for all students universally, I also have the special educator who's in there doing the planning with the teachers to really hone in on what parts of that lesson have to be modified for that particular student. The students, there are some students that have maybe a smaller class that to get the initial skill sets going. I find that math tends to be that area where we're needing to give more smaller group explicit instruction. Your Englishes, your histories, certainly your electives, our facts, we expect that they should be in with their peers. And the beautiful thing is too, is that the administration really supports that. That's the other thing. You've got to have administration that supports inclusion in order for inclusion to take place, and the expectation is set. The other thing I want to say that we do too, and I'm not sure how Masco does it, at the high school, we actually have all our students taking the MCAS. We don't make assumptions that someone can't pass part or whole of the MCAS until they show us that for some reason, that's just not something they're able to do. So we very much hold the expectation of progress, change, independent of what your disability is. And I think that goes a long way if the message is the same about inclusion in everything we do. We do have, I think, last year we had one student, this year we have one student who's on an alt portfolio. And they still sit for the MCAS, actually, they do both.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I see Zilly's hand again, I
Really?
think.
Yep.
I can't let CPAC have all the airtime. And I also try to sometimes ask we've had a few of these interviews since I've been, not for this job, but since I've been involved, and I try to ask the same questions. So another one, and it piggybacks on this, but it's different. So like CPAC you just talked about the literacy concerns that had been sort of identified, pandemic or not, coming up from the elementaries. But there's also concerns in the community about, the learning loss, pandemic recovery. I know that's across the board everywhere. So you would have that in your district now as well. So if you could just take a minute to talk a little bit about your thoughts and strategies around that.
For my data people, I'm going to ask a question first. Do you know how much learning loss has happened?
Mike, do we know how much
Do
learning?
we have a sense?
No,
Okay.
no.
I offer that because some of the data coming back in Arlington certainly showed learning loss, but not to the marked degree that we were afraid of, which made us all breathe a little bit better, right? It doesn't mean we didn't have it. We had it. I also find that the resiliency rate of our students they are far more skilled at this than than I am, for sure, in terms of resiliency. But we had to pivot very quickly to address the academic needs through addressing, at least in Arlington, the emotional needs. We had some students who were just struggling emotionally so deeply that their natural learning gaps from the pandemic were even more so. So we pivoted into parts of, not the entire school, but going into semesterized learning and credit by objective, where we taught to the explicit standards that are needed in order to measure knowledge, comprehension of each content area, so that we weren't overburdening the brain, but we were maximizing the comprehension. This has worked out very well. It's a short term. We do it about for maybe a semester, but typically a quarter. It's an intervention. It's for all students. It's gen ed, but it's what we did is we brought together the specialists in special ed, school adjustment counselors for sure, and content area specialists, and stopped working in silos and started working together. So it shared the kind of the labor of doing the work. So it was kinder for teachers, but it also built a lot of hope in our students. And it allowed them to start catching up and start to make some progress in a relatively quick time. The other thing that we've done too, which I know we're going to continue, is we did a, Arlington doesn't do summer school. You know, they usually go to other districts. So they set up summer school who were demonstrating a pretty consistent pattern. We had kind of entrance criteria, if you can say it like that. And for Arlington, we tracked our D's and F students, or people who were tipping in that direction, because you can see patterns. And then we afforded them the opportunity to come to Arlington. They had like a short summer school with the Arlington staff, and they did credit recovery and kind of a lot of repair work, getting the kids back to sea level. We're still doing it though. I think we have years to come. You know, something that I've noticed right away is my 10th graders that are there are really emotionally 8th graders. They are who they should be in their own right, but we're expecting them to be a 10th grader without going through the 9th grade training. So I think we have to also be kind to ourselves and be mindful of that. And you poor 7th graders, they were 5th graders. That's a big gap, you know, between when we left school and when we came back.
I'll just ask a follow-up on that then, and it is the last question that I asked the last candidate, which is preventative thoughts. So you just talked about the emotional state of kids, you know, and how it's going to be a little while. It's not just catching up academically. There's just some social learning. And anyone who knows me knows that I really do strongly believe that the emotional, that foundation is critical before learning can happen, like we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
So do you have any ideas about preventative programs that can kind of put those things in front of people in a proactive way, so that kids, families, so that it's not like a shock that we're facing these things. It's not something that we're, you know, you're ahead of it and normalizing it a little bit just in order to be able to get past it, if I'm making sense. So thoughts about preventative or proactive programming for the community to help handle that kind of thing.
Well, as a direct result of building the plane while you're flying it, we can take those lessons and continue some of those practices that then become preventative for other students. One of my greatest worries about coming through this experience, which I think has changed us all. It's changed us all. It's changed who we are as educators and kind of how we looked at things. And one of my worries is that some of the practices that have come out of this are able to be pivoted, that won't be pivoted into good preventative practices and having resources available. Often it comes down to funding. I understand that, I respect it, but I worry about that. I do. So I see today's crisis intervention or patchwork. Somebody used the term earlier, it's like Band-Aid work and whack-a-mole. But those whack-a-moles don't have to be whack-a-mole. They eventually could be your best practices and prevention loops. Gretchen, did you raise your hand again? Oh, I saw her creeping up there. Looking at everybody's name.
Yeah, any other questions? Jackie?
Since I'm not hogging anybody else's time, can you tell me about your experience with like 18 to 22 programming and for all students as best preparing them for life beyond high school, and having appropriate plans and fallback plans? I know I've worked with Patty Bullard and what we call the transition task force team at Masco, and it's been kind of start and slow down over the past couple of years because of the pandemic. But a lot of the work has been around targeting those students who may go off to college. They have the academic skills but don't have the social skills, so they go off and they flounder and they fail, and then they don't have a fallback plan. That's one population that we've targeted. And the other population is, how do you prepare, the population of students with more significant intellectual disabilities to do something in our community beyond go work at Market Basket, which is like the local place, which I think unfortunately many parents, whether they're not aware of other opportunities or they know that that's a solid opportunity, that's where a lot of students end up. So I would love your thoughts on what a transition program would look like.
I would start with saying right out loud that students with intellectual impairments can go to college now. And so stopping off at Market Basket should maybe be what all other neurotypical kids do at the certain age, and they get their first job. But they can go to college. We have a very vibrant transition piece going on in Arlington. And I just hired last year a transition specialist. It was actually one of my staff who went back to school to really hone in on this. Because what we were doing is we were sending out kids out of district for this part of their development. So we work backwards. I tend to work backwards a lot. And what it is I look at what's my goal, and then I work backwards. And so and this isn't just me, this is in collaboration with great minds. We developed this tool where we look at we want to stretch it to grade 8, but we haven't yet, starting at grade 9. What are the soft and hard skills that align with someone who is more or less a 9th grader, 10th grader, 11th grader, as a guide to have a sense of what we want to work on? That transition work should not occur their senior year. Transition work should be starting right at the time they enter high school. So we actually have explicit transition classes. One's called Young Adult Living. Some people call it adulting. It's kind of cool, but we call it Young Adult Living. We also have students that have been in our ASD program. We have students like you had mentioned that, intellectually would demonstrate wonderful knowledge wonderful, exciting knowledge. But to have that same skill set in the social context of learning was not at the same place. So what we did this, I'll give you an example of this one particular student. At grade 10, we decided to modify his schedule and thin out the more hard concrete classes, which he's very good at, which he did not like that we did that. And we added in meditation and yoga and calming sessions for him. And that expanded his schooling to 5 years and not 4. Because we know he's fantastic at the content, but he couldn't bring his kind of interpersonal skills at the same rate with the same success as the other part of him. And then he would get frustrated, and then he would kind of cycle in his space. We had to help him, we had to teach him how to slow down. That young person now attends MIT. And I have to believe it has to do with the brilliance of the staff that worked with that young man to think about how to, it's okay to slow it down. Right now, we don't have an explicit in-house 18 to 22 program. We have some students that stay with us, and like this example, for an extra year. But what we've done is we have partnered with colleges, and we help work on the skills, travel training. How do they get to, are they driving themselves? Are they not? Are they taking public transportation? Should they take public transportation? And accessing the colleges, local colleges, community colleges. It could go further than that. Right now we're in community colleges, and we send a staff person with them. There are many colleges out there that actually have explicit college structures for various levels of young adults with disabilities. So that's why I started it by saying that, you know, students can go to college. We need to find those colleges that are doing it. And so they're willing to partner with the high school. And so our transition specialist actually has made that bridge. Next school year, we have 2 seniors now who are going to stay on board for next year to attend college with our support. And then they come back twice a week, 2 blocks a week, and we do academic support to help foster what, you know, studying habits look like now as a college student versus a high school student, and check in with them in terms of their successes. It's a slow study, but it needs to start back. It needs to tie in at 9th grade. We also have our students starting to run their own IP meetings. That in and of itself is a skill when you talk about interviewing, holding conversation, leadership. How do you prepare for sitting in front of a group of people that are all adults when you're the child? So we have had some really nice successes where they either take part in leading their own IEP meeting. And we start with the transition planning form. That's the tool they use to kind of guide their conversations. And we do have some that actually lead it while their liaison kind of sits off to their left. Those are important transition skills as well. In the new high school, we have a new high school being built. I don't know if you've been by Arlington, but right on the front lawn, there's this massive structure, new high school, gorgeous. And in the planning, they wanted us to plan what the physical building looked on based on what our goals are for our departments. And mine was the 18, not just mine, our is the 18 to 22. So they're building an apartment in there. So it'll have washer dryer, it will have, how do you make your bed? It will have refrigerators. It will have, it's that type of bringing it to the district that's going to make a large difference for many of our students.
Okay. Any other questions? We have time for a couple more. We're teachers, we're good at wait time. So
Yeah, true, 20-second wait time.
exactly. Okay. I've put in the chat a couple of times now, the link to a Google form for feedback that you can send to me. I appreciate it. I use that as part of my deliberative process and, making a decision as to which candidate to recommend. And we will have the recordings of both of these sessions posted probably through my blog tomorrow morning. So if you want to go back and take a look at either this session or the one that was earlier this week on Monday, that would be great. And they'll be up there tomorrow for you to take a look at. Last call for questions.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
I just want to know, what is it that you like best about Masco? What makes you happy when you send your kids to school? What makes you trust that they're receiving what you hope they receive?
Just jumping in.
So I'm going to answer for two of my students, and I'm going to tell you my typical learner loves the community, and she really missed that during remote learning and hybrid learning. And yeah, I think and I can't describe it because I'm not 15. I haven't been for a long time, but there's a feeling about the community for her that really connects her to her friends. And she's very reserved, but I think she's really finding her voice now in the high school. I hear she's arguing a little bit with which she may or may not get from her mother. But I mentioned that to say that she clearly feels safe in her classrooms to do that, which I think speaks very highly to her teachers' ability to create that safe space for her. And for my student on an IEP, I have just received extraordinary care with her, and I feel, I think what makes me feel safe about sending her to school is that it's clear to me that they are really invested in her well-being as a human, and I feel that, and I see their skills, and it's just been a really, really positive experience for me this year.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Oh, I just switched way over.
Yeah, everybody moved around on me there.
Everybody's jumping.
Hey, that's such a good question. And honestly, sometimes I feel when interviewing someone for the district, it's a two-way interview, like you need to feel like this is a district that fits for you too. And I know you did a lot of homework before even applying, so hopefully you still feel that way. But I'm an alumni of Masconomet, and my parents, I'm a first-generation immigrant, and the experience for us was great. Like always, just felt welcome and included. And now I'm raising biracial kids in the district, and again, like just knowing that they will find a place that they belong here. And so far for my kids, they're so different. It's like they're totally different, 3 kids, but the oldest really connected, being really involved in clubs and engaged in doing things that would improve. So I got to see a lot of other students that were engaged in that giving back. That's huge here, that in my experience with her, and teachers supporting that, and having, the teachers and the staff, it's just the connection. And I have a younger one who's super involved and active and social. So of course, just kind of loves school. And I have one who's really struggling, who I I don't want to be too public about, but I have about what's going on. But my experience with the support and the creativity of the response from student services and the staff to find ways to support without ever making there be any sense of shame around the struggle has been incredible, just awesome. So those are some things I like about Masco.
Yeah.
Does that help?
Like that too. Yeah, I like hearing that too.
Any others? Jackie?
I have a little different perspective to share because my kids, well, my daughter's not up there yet, but I have had so many wonderful opportunities and experiences to work with the staff through the transition task force, or even professionally doing some consulting or completing some FBAs and home assessments for them in the past. And I adore the staff. They have outstanding special education staff that are so invested. And I see some of their names and some of them have popped off, but they are so invested and they really will do anything for the students. I know personally, because of the community and my investment in our community now, while my daughter's little, wanting her to remain part of this community just makes me want to work harder with the staff that are there and the staff staying there so that, you know, they work to have the programming to support her so she is able to benefit from these amazing staff that Masco has. And I see the work happening because thankfully I'm able to be part of it, to be part of the, you know, the committees and the CPAC and have the interactions with the staff, which has been amazing.
Thank you. Yeah. I felt that when I walked through and met with different, you know, groups. And I think you're absolutely right. I think there is a lot that's happening in Masco. And even if it's starting from like the task force that you're referring to, that it may feel small, but it has the potential to transform programming and transforming relationships between families and school students and keeping us together. So I heard a lot of nice beginnings. And staff were so excited about it. They were so happy to like talk about it, which I loved.
Okay. Well, again, I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. We'll kind of wrap things up. Again, as I said, the link to a feedback form is down there in the chat. So please take a couple of minutes to let me know what your impressions of the candidates are. We're actually, this search process is probably going to get pushed out into March. And so we still got a couple of weeks. So if you want to take some time, that'd be fine. Again, thanks for everybody for coming. Thank you, Lynn, for giving your time tonight and all day today.
Yes.
It's a long day. I'm sure you're going to sleep well tonight. And wake up thinking, I should have said that, you know, but that's the way we always do this when we interview. We're like, oh, I forgot to tell them this. But thank you. Appreciate all the time that you've put in.
Of course.
It
was my pleasure, everybody. Thank you so much. This was really quite wonderful. Take care.
All right. Good night. Thank you.